Hear the whispers from within, balance to restore, ailings to relieve. Feel the nature keeping us, nature healing us, flowers, leaves, and roots within. Hear the mind calming you, soothing you, love and kindness inside out. Let the herbs from middle world heal. Welcome wellness, welcome wellness. It's revealed herbs, middle world herbs.
Hello and welcome to the Middle World Herbs Natural Wellbeing Series, where we talk about restoring and maintaining your health in safe and natural ways while incorporating both the physical and the emotional sides of healing. We go live twice a week. We go live on Wednesdays and Thursdays, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And every week we talk about different aspects of health. Well, today we're focusing on cancer awareness, and that's in recognition in support of Cancer Survivor Day, which is on June 5th. So today we're going to talk about the causes, the warning signs, and prevention of cancer. We're also going to discuss amazing ways of managing risk factors naturally. So my name is Deanne. I'm your host today. I'm here with our special guest, our scientific consultant for Middle World Herbs, Dr. Jacquie Leone. She's a naturopathic medical doctor, board certified holistic nutritionist, and psychology enthusiast. So welcome. Thanks for joining us as always. So if you want to just briefly introduce yourself and share your message to all cancer survivors out there who may be listening today as well.
Yes, of course. So I just want to start by saying that I really admire any people who have survived cancer themselves directly, anybody who is the partner of and or family member of a loved one who has friend, coworker, who's experienced secondhand observing their process. And it's a struggle. It is for everyone involved. And my heart goes out to everyone who I guess has been affected by cancer. And I just want you to know that there are support systems, there are ways to address it, there are ways to help for post-cancer treatment, there are ways to catch it early, screening, and everything from before, during, and after. You're not alone. Even when it's scary, there are support systems. And I don't know, outside of the sciencey stuff, the emotional energetics of it, I know it's a struggle, and it hurts the body, it hurts the mind. And whether or not you identify as cancer survivor, because actually in practice, what I learned is not everybody wants to be called cancer survivor. Sometimes it can be a trigger for them. So I just am in support of any and everyone who's been affected. And if you have any questions or need any resources for support groups or anything, please don't hesitate to ask in the chat, because I would love to help spread that information and help you feel a little bit less alone in your struggle.
All right. Well, that is a really good message to start with. And if we do have anyone in the audience who is currently battling cancer or is a survivor, please send us a message, throw it in the chat, and share your story, because we really see you as a hero, and we'd love to be able to support you as well. So if you have questions for Dr. Jacquie today, it's a big topic to cover. So throw them in there. We're happy to talk about everything and anything. And I also wanted to introduce you guys to 2 supplements that we're going to talk about in more detail here. So we have our Berberine, which is this one, Berberine Hcl 40. And then we also have Berberine with Bitter Melon and Banaba leaf. So we'll be getting into those. And why Berberine? Well, amongst the many benefits of this amazing compound, one of the most researched ones is its cancer suppressive potential. So while Berberine is not the only herb which has been attracting a lot of attention in cancer research, it is one of the most promising ones. So put a simple search into PubMed for Berberine and cancer, and you're going to get 127 results listing scientific publications looking into Berberine's effects in the context of cancer. So before we dive in to this discussion about managing cancer risk factors and further looking into Berberine's superpowers, let's take a broader view for a moment. So Dr. Jacquie, what is cancer in a medical sense?
That's a fantastic question. I think a lot of people hear the cancer word and fear automatically sets in, and it's kind of this insurmountable monster in a way. And I think when we can really peel back the layer, fear is usually associated to just not knowing, right? And when we understand, we have information, we know what's going on in the body, information is very powerful and can empower us to recognize what's happening in our body and how to catch it early, prevent it, and or address it once it has happened. So we've talked a lot in our Amazon Lives over time what oxidative stress and inflammation are, how free radicals from pollution, alcohol, cigarettes, certain foods, certain habits, lifestyle habits can add to the damage of cells, the DNA of the cell. Now, the DNA is the blueprint. It's the thing that tells the cell what to do. And so what happens in cancer cells is those damaged cells multiply or proliferate is the word faster than the body can address the damaged cells. And cancer cells are not like regular cells. So in a nutshell, normal cells go through a very specific set of instructions. Their DNA or their blueprint is you make this substance, you excrete this substance, and then when you are damaged or have done your job, you die and are recycled. New ones are put in your place, and it continues the process. It's very methodical, it's very linear. Cancer cells don't. Cancer cells do not follow the strict rule of strict process of instruction, right? And so a normal life cycle of a cell, you grow, you divide, you die. But a cancer cell is abnormal. And so it's going to overdivide and it's not going to die. And that's the problem with cancer is instead of dying off, cancer cells reproduce. And they're reproducing these abnormal cells that are not following those instructions. And then what can happen over time is they can invade localized cells or organ systems and tissues that are close to that tumor or where those cancer cells are reproducing. And then at some point, if not addressed in time, those mutated cells can actually go through lymph systems and blood systems and be delivered to other organ systems. And that's when it's called metastatic cancer, or it goes to other areas. So it could start in the lungs, for example, but then we can see mutated lung cells in the brain. Just as, an example. So cancer is essentially an overgrowth of these mutated or damaged cells because they don't die. They don't follow the function and then death process of a normal functional cell. So now the question begs, well, how do cells get damaged? We're going to talk more about that today, but essentially that's what cancer is. It's a bunch of cells that don't follow its instructions.
Okay, no, that's a really good explanation of it. And who gets cancer? Does the risk go up as we get older?
The short answer is yes. So the biggest risk factor for cancer, believe it or not, is age. Most cancers, 50 to 60%, are actually in people 70 years and older. 1 in 2 women and 1 in 3 men in their lifetime will get cancer, statistically speaking, in the United States at this point. And so the older you get, the more likely you are to get cancer. So Mayo Clinic published numbers just to give you an idea. And if you're between the ages or less than 20, childhood cancers, leukemias, things like that, 20 and under, about 25 cases for every 100,000 people in the US, right? Which is a pretty low prevalence. Now, once you get to, 20 to 49, 50, now we're looking at about 350 people. From 25, we went to 350, right? Out of 100,000. And then once we're over the age of 70, it's 1,000 people out of every 100,000 are likely to get cancer. So it's not something that's talked about a lot, but age is definitely one of the biggest risk factors. Now, outside of age, I do want to speak to inheritance. You can inherit certain genes that make you more or less likely to develop cancer as well. So when we say who gets cancer, if you have the genetic profile or the blueprint, like we just talked about, plus you have risk factors in your lifestyle, food, certain diet, lifestyle, sun exposure, stress, and you're elderly, right? That's kind of going to give you even greater odds of developing cancer. So the elderly, definitely, but we also, and kind of further along today, I want to talk about something called epigenetics, which are things that turn on and turn off genes in our blueprint, because that's also a big factor in this. But yeah, just to summarize real quick, yes, age is definitely an issue for cancer, makes you at higher risk.
Interesting. Okay. Those are really interesting statistics, because you said 25 in 100,000 for statistically for kids. And I know 2 children battling leukemia, and I don't think I know 100,000 kids. So
wow,
seems like a lot. Yeah. I know.
Are they in the same family?
No, different.
No?
Well, it's actually really sad. I don't know. One actually passed away, so one is deceased,
Oh.
and then another is battling. But hopefully in remission soon. So, yeah, but totally different people. Yeah, and it's a childhood cancer is a whole nother show, but it's the least funded cancer out there. And it's like the least progressive.
Because it's the smallest population, and what they don't realize though is because it's the smallest population that gets cancer doesn't mean it's not the most damaging. And then we have to look at least from my perspective medically, what's going on in those children, that if they do have children, are they putting their children at great, like, it should be more funded in my opinion, because it's not, we're not in a bubble, right? It's not, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So, you know, anyway, I could talk to you about that all day long.
Yeah,
so, but I know we have other things to get to, so.
Yes, but this, you know, it's one of those just all statistics where you hear 1,000 in 100,000. You think, well, that's not that bad. But then it's like, how many people do you know that have cancer? It's like, you probably know quite a few. So it's, even though it doesn't seem like a lot, it's like, I feel like we all know someone. So definitely a very pertinent topic today. So what are the different types of cancers in the stages? I know we always hear like stage 4, stage 1, stage 2.
Yeah, so first, before we talk about stages of cancer, I want to talk about tumor growth, because a lot of people hear tumor growth and they think cancer automatically. But I want to make it clear that tumor growth comes in 2 schools: benign, which is non-cancerous, and malignant, which is cancerous. Okay, so for those of you who have ever had tumors removed, if you've ever had skin lesions removed, if you've ever had cysts removed, and they do what's called a biopsy, they take a portion of the tissue of that tumor or lesion and they look at it under a microscope to see how the cells are functioning, how they're forming. Now, if they're all following that normal cellular life I talked about before, they just happen to have a mass, that's a benign tumor. That is not cancerous, okay? So I really want to differentiate tumors, benign and malignant. Now, when we're looking at malignancy or cancerous tumors, cancerous cells, that's when we're moving into the stages, okay? So if somebody says I have a stage 3 benign tumor, that's not possible. Okay, so benign means we want to remove it so it doesn't keep growing, but it's not going to infiltrate local tissue. It's not going to travel through the blood to different organ systems. It's not going to spread and cause more damage. Okay, so I kind of wanted to get that out of the way before we talk stages, because I know some people can confuse that. So outside of tumors, when we're looking at stages, the higher the stage, the more developed or more spread the cancer has had. So stage 1 is very localized. It's a small area. It has not spread to any lymph nodes. It has not spread to any other tissues. We can literally cut out the damaged cancerous cells. And if done correctly, you, in most cases, can remove all of those cancerous cells. It's caught very, very early, very small, very local. Stage 2, it's grown larger, but it has not spread yet. Okay, so it's not small and local with the fine borders where we can, remove it as easily. It's taking up a larger mass or area in that tissue, organ, system, on the skin, wherever it's located. Now, stage 3, it's grown larger and most likely spread or started to spread to lymph nodes and surrounding tissue. So, for example, breast cancer, right? So if you have had a lumpectomy, you've probably had stage 1 or 2, where they've removed the lump or the localized area, whether it's a small area or a slightly larger area. Now, Most commonly, breast cancer is diagnosed in what's called the upper outer quadrant of the breast, which is closest to the armpit. And usually stage 3 and 4 is diagnosed there or found there because we have lymph nodes or lymph chains in our armpits and in our arm to help fight infection close to the lungs, close to the chest, close to the heart. We all know tonsil lymph nodes. We all know, lymph nodes in our face. We have them in our groin, and then we have them in our armpits as well. So just to follow the stages in the example, a lumpectomy would be stage 1 or 2. Stage 3 is when it's now in those local lymph nodes. So the cancer cells have moved into the lymph. And then if it's developed to stage 4, and that's usually when they will take the whole breast at that point, just so there's no, that's a mastectomy. So there's a difference, right? Lump is local. Mastectomy is the whole area. And then stage 4, that means it's gone to other organs. So in breast cancer, for example, it might move to the lungs. It might even travel up into the brain. It might move to other estrogen sensitive areas of a woman's reproductive system, like her uterus or her ovaries, for example. So those are the 4 stages, and they get progressively worse with the number. Stage 4 just means that it has spread to other organ systems, and now it's called systemic. It's throughout the whole system.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. All right, so if you guys haven't hit our follow button yet, make sure you are following us. We would love to stay connected, and thank you if you followed us so far. So what parts of our body are more or less prone to developing cancer?
Yeah, I get that asked a lot. So some people are kind of wondering or have asked, are there cancer-free or areas or tissues that just will not develop cancer? And unfortunately, the answer is no. And the reason is because everything is made up of cells. So if a cell composes that organ or tissue, then it has the potential to develop cancer, is the reality. Now, I will say that some organ systems, some tissues are definitely more vulnerable. So the Cancer Registry of Norway, for example, says no organ and no body part is 100% spared by cancer because body cells divide and they can go anywhere. This can always happen. But what they did find, both in the United States, Canada, and the Norway, Finland, Sweden, those are the areas that they really did a lot more studying. They noticed that brain, heart, pancreas, and small intestines have the rarest occurrence. I'm going to say that again. Brain, heart, pancreas, and small intestines have the rarest or lowest occurrence compared to, these are the 4 big ones. We have breast cancer, skin cancer, colon cancer, and prostate cancer. So those are the 4 most vulnerable. So just to give you an idea, colon and rectum cancer is almost 1 million deaths a year. Well, I guess between 2020 and 2021, these are the statistics at least, about 1 million in colon and rectal, and about 800,000 in liver, 700,000 in stomach, over 1 million in breast cancer, and over 1 million in lung cancer. So those are the prevalence of those, and even more in skin. Skin is about 1.5 million. And skin cancer is UVA, UVB rays, which are just known as carcinogens, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So anyhow, basically any organ system that's constantly exposed to toxins or potential carcinogens are more likely to develop cancer. Also, tissues that are sensitive to sex hormones. So again, the prostate and the breast.
Okay, and how does cancer usually start?
So like I was saying before, cancer is the division of just mutated cells that aren't following that pathway, that specific recipe or blueprint, if you will. So that's essentially where it starts, is oxidative stress from free radicals. Certain things we're eating, putting on our body, they're causing damage. And when this damage to the cells happen at a rate where our body cannot address the damage. It gets out of hand, and then these cells overgrow and cause cancer. So it really starts at the cellular level, and it starts by the DNA, or again, that blueprint. Guys, we have a set recipe in every cell, and every cell's constantly working together to carry out that recipe. My hair grows out of my head blonde, right? Well, what's that recipe look like genetically? My skin is fair. My melanocytes or skin cells work at a different, they have a recipe for that, right? Versus somebody who's African American and has short, curly, dark hair, or, darker skin or melanocytes, right? Eye color, the whole body, the way we look, the way we function, every cell is constantly carrying out this automated process of steps every single day. And cancer starts when that gets disrupted, when that process no longer occurs, damage to that recipe or damage to that process. And so it can come out of anywhere. It can be diet, it can be lack of exercise, it can be lifestyle, it can be what you're putting on your body, in your body, where you're working, what you're breathing, what you're drinking, all of these things. It's the perfect cocktail for cancer to begin. And so it really just starts by knowing the cell type, knowing how it could go wrong. And once it goes wrong, that's what's happening. And that's why screening is so important. That's why getting checked regularly is so important. And again, prevalence takes a jump around age 40, right? We're going from about 25 cases to 350 cases to 1,000 cases out of every 100,000, every 20-ish years. So early 40s is really where you want to start taking screening seriously, because that's where we start to see it the most.
Okay, cool. What does naturopathic medicine have to offer for cancer prevention and management?
This is awesome. So what I do as a naturopath is understanding the root cause of cancer, and what is happening is damaged cells. So how can I help prevent cells from being damaged as consistently? How can I address the cells that have been damaged, right? So we're going to go right back to oxidative stress. What are ways to combat oxidative stress? Vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and those special magical powers of plants we've always talked about called phytochemicals. Okay, so I am not trying to punish you when I put you on a meal plan that is plant-based as my patient, I promise. I am not trying to judge you at a barbecue if you're gonna, have everything grilled, which is a carcinogen as well. You're basically adding cancer-producing potential to food every time you grill. If I say no thank you to grilled food, I'm not trying to insult you or make you feel guilty or bad, right? So we have to really recognize naturopathically or in the community of making those choices. When we hear work out and eat vegetables, I think some of us go back to being 6 years old and being told what to do, when it's not a punishment. It is really about moving you closer to this paradigm of health. Okay, so I think of health on a linear line, and over here I think of disease and death, and over here I think of perfect health. Okay, now very rarely are we ever going to get to perfect health, and hopefully we're never going to get to severe disease. So let's say we're kind of living in the middle. Our body always has homeostasis, and for everything we do that moves us closer to disease, every glass of wine, every cigarette, every time we lay out in the sun, every time we freak out and have a stressful month or something like that and our body's hijacked, we need to do things on that paradigm to get us moving in the opposite direction. So every food we eat, every liquid we put in our body, every substance we put on our body, everything that we put in our air is either going to get us on that line closer to disease or closer to health. And so that's why when we say things with moderation is have the cake, right? But then go for a jog. Right? Go in the sun. Oh, I forgot sunscreen. That's okay. Put on the aloe, right? Eat high vitamin C foods for a week to combat that oxidative stress. So it's really all about trying to stay as close to the center, or ideally even closer to this perfect health, which again will never exist. But we have control over where we fall on that line. Yes, genetics are there. And this is something in naturopathic medicine highly studied. It's called epigenetics. Our epidermis, right? Epi means above or on. So our genes have the ability to be turned on and turned off. We can have, and I've talked about this before in previous episodes, but for those who might have missed it, you can have two twins born with the exact same DNA blueprint, the exact same instructions. And one twin is, let's say, lives plant-based in the mountains with fresh air, spring water, low stress life, out in nature all the time, healthy habits, right? And then we have another twin who lives, maybe they have a night job, because when you have inverted schedule where you work all night and sleep all day, that's another risk factor. So let's say they do that. Let's say they smoke cigarettes. Let's say they drink alcohol every day. Let's say when they are in the sun, they don't wear sunscreen. Let's say they don't drink a lot of water. They eat a lot of meats, cured meats, a lot of processed sugar, right? What will happen? They have the same exact recipe. Their body is inclined is structured to have the same cell growth, cell process. So why does this one develop cancer and this one doesn't? Because lifestyle and nutrition have the ability and impact to turn on and turn off different genes. So if for any reason you do have a family member or potential inheritance of developing cancer, your lifestyle and diet will directly implicate where on that line you're going to move closer to developing cancer or more likely to prevent cancer. So naturopathically, we really truly believe in early screening, early detection, and prevention. And the best way to do that is to live in a moderate lifestyle where you're paying attention to what you're putting in your body and on your body. Okay? So in the broad strokes, that's really the philosophy of how naturopaths will address cancer.
Okay, now you had mentioned earlier grilling and how it's a carcinogen. I just have always wondered, okay, what's the difference between barbecuing and grilling and like cooking food in the oven on like the broil setting? Is it all food if you just char it?
So that's a great question. And pardon me, it's going to be because of the direct flame. And usually because the flame is utilizing a petroleum-based something, whether it's coal or it's propane. We're taking those chemicals from those substances, lighting them on fire, creating combustibility, and then that type of heat is being applied to the thing we're eating. So that charred outside is carcinogenic. And carcinogenic or a carcinogen basically means a substance, an organism, or an agent capable of causing cancer. Okay? It occurs naturally in the environment. The sunlight is a carcinogen, believe it or not, but we need a little sunlight to make vitamin D, because when we're vitamin D deficient, that also makes us sensitive to things like colon cancers. So 20 minutes in the sun can combat cancer. 60 minutes in the sun is going to potentially create cancer. Okay. So that's why it's like, I don't want to get this into a fear state. Never eat grilled food, never go out in the sun, live a hobbit's life, which I guess would be cool because the shires are nice, but my nerd just came out. Anyhow, let's moving on to carcinogens. So cigarette smoke is a carcinogen, exhaust fumes from, automobiles, exposure to chemicals. So that's why if you live in a house with asbestos or lead paint in the walls when it's a really old house. So these are all just kind of aggregate adding. And when you have 10 risk factors at once in your day-to-day lifestyle that are under your control, like grilling, where you live, what you're eating, what you're putting on your body, right? Certain chemicals on our body, BPHs and things like that, parabens, phthalates, those are all hormone disruptors. They are all associated to higher risk of cancer. That is really why those types of things are important. So again, have the burger if you want the burger from the grill, but take some vitamin C that day. Help combat that oxidative stress that those carcinogens are potentially doing, right? Again, go out in the sun, have fun, apply sunscreen. If you forget, take vitamin E, C, quercetin, berberine, all of these helpful plant things, turmeric, ginger, that are going to help combat the damage that was just done. It's not about being perfect. It's about being aware,
Yeah, that's such good advice. Okay, well, let's jump into our supplements because I had talked about them earlier. So we have the Middle World Berberine HCl 40 and the Middle World Berberine with Bitter Melon and banana leaf. So those are these two. And Dr. Jackie, could you just tell us a little more about the properties of berberine?
Yes. So berberine is pretty awesome. It does a lot of stuff, believe it or not. I think plants just have this inherent intelligence about them that and that's why I say, you know, eat the rainbow or eat a bunch of plants. And I personally prefer plant-based, is because you're literally eating medicine every single day. And berberine is a great example of that. So berberine is a phytochemical. It's phyto meaning plant, so it's a chemical in plants. And it has this kind of special power in the form of what's called an alkaloid, for any science nerds who want to look that up. But essentially what that does is alkaloids in plants have different actions. Different alkaloids do different things, right? So an alkaloid in codeine or the poppy plant takes away pain. The alkaloid in coffee beans have caffeine, so it blocks adenosine receptors in your brain and gives you energy. So in berberine, the alkaloid is very specific for a handful of actions. The two biggest ones that report, connected today are going to be anti-proliferation, remember cell growth, and anti-metastatic, means spreading. Okay, so it stops the cell growth and it stops the spreading of those bad cells, which is huge. Another thing, or a couple of other things it does, is it's been shown to lower glucose levels in people with diabetes. And so studies show that it helps the body respond to its own insulin better. In quick little review, insulin, if we have a cell and we got sugar in the blood, because we just ate something with sugar, and we have the cell, what gets the sugar from the blood into the cell? Who's the doorman there? That's insulin. Okay? People with diabetes, insulin didn't show up for work that day. There's no doorman. So the sugar in the blood stays really high, and then the cell starts to die because it's not getting its energy it needs. So berberine is awesome because it wakes up insulin and says, hey, insulin, you're late for work. And so insulin's going to show up, open the door, make the sugar go into the cell better, and lower insulin dependence or injection of insulin in type 2 diabetics, which is absolutely fantastic. Anytime we can get the body to trust its own substance production and get stuff to show up for work, it's going to be an improvement. And berberine does that for insulin and blood glucose. And I think the last thing to highlight is cholesterol. So there's a lot of evidence that berberine helps lower cholesterol levels in people that have high cholesterol. So if your body is naturally one of those bodies, which is, it can be genetic, it can also be because of our diet, where you're just eating lots of bad cholesterol, or the kind of cholesterol that goes to and clings to organ systems or sticks to the walls of arteries and things like that, causing plaques. Because those plaques, when they stick to the wall and they start to form more and more gunk, that's what creates blockages like heart attack, stroke, pulmonary embolism. So what's really awesome is berberine can help lower that, bind to that, and pull it out. So we're not getting those sticky plaques everywhere. And it helps bring it to the colon to be brought out of the body. So its actions, those are probably, to me, the most powerful, is going to be the lower cholesterol, help insulin wake up and get resensitized, and then prevent bad cells from populating or proliferating, and also moving to other organ systems.
That's amazing. Okay, so why should berberine be on the radar for anyone who's cancer conscious?
I think because of those first two things I happened to mention, is the anti-proliferation, anti-metastatic effects. And so it's end products of metabolic waste are pretty toxic. And so berberine can help lower the toxicity of those metabolites. It also helps increase our storage of nitrogen, and nitrogen combats that damage as well. And last but not least, it's very, very highly protective to healthy cells. So it's just going to prevent that damage from happening in the first place in a lot of cases. And then if that damage does happen to the cell, it's going to stop it from overgrowing. Right? Where if you have a cancer cell in an environment with no berberine, it will proliferate or overgrow very quickly. And then it will metastasize or spread very, very quickly. Once we get to a certain population or proliferative size, it's so much easier to spread. In the presence of berberine, those cells still grow but it doesn't halt it. So I want to be clear, this is not like a cure, okay? I don't want to over promise and under deliver. That's not, this is just science. In the presence of berberine, cancer cells significantly slow 60 to 80% that proliferation. And not only that, but the likelihood, because now it's not overgrowing, so now it's not going to spread. So if you are cancer conscious, if you are working to prevent cancer, if you know it's in your family, if you've had chemotherapy and you want to stay in remission, berberine is going to be a fantastic thing to talk to your doctor about, in my professional opinion, for those reasons specifically.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, I want everyone to see the little capsules because they are this beautiful, intensely rich yellow color, and that's what it looks like. And this supplement actually has an unprecedented 97% purity, which is confirmed by third-party testing. And berberine with bitter melon and banana leaf still also has that really nice, beautiful yellow color as well, but it may be a little bit lighter because it includes bitter melon and banana leaf in it, in addition to berberine. So both supplements are made here in the USA. They are GMP certified, thoroughly tested by third-party labs. They are veggie capsules. You get 60 per bottle, and right now they are $19.49 for Berberine Hcl 40, and then our one with the banana leaf and bitter melon is $21.49 right now. So great prices on them. And another really amazing thing about Middle World Herbs that I want to share with you guys is that we plant a tree for every single supplement that's purchased. So we've partnered with One Tree Planted. And every time you get a supplement, a tree is planted. So not only are you helping your body, but you're helping the earth that we all live on. So something to feel good about as well. And if you have not bought your berberine supplement yet, grab it. Have we not convinced you yet? So we often get asked, what's the difference between berberine and berberine with bitter melon? So which one should be selected, Dr. Jackie, for who?
That's a really good question. So you remember how I kind of mentioned berberine like wakes insulin up, it makes him come to work. I don't know why I gendered insulin. But it makes it go to work, I should say. It makes it go to work. It, you know, makes us resensitized to our own insulin, is what berberine does. Now, bitter melon has another benefit on insulin, but it works a little bit different. Now, bitter melon actually has several chemicals that mimic insulin, right? So berberine is there to make sure insulin shows up to work, and bitter melon is there to give a substance that mimics and help, you know, works with insulin, does a similar job as insulin, i.e. now you have more doormen going to work, or things to get the blood sugar into that cell, like I was saying before. So because of this, bitter melon has actually been shown in a lot of studies to lower blood sugar in people, especially those, again, who have type 2 diabetes. So if you have to decide between berberine alone or berberine with bitter melon, to me, the biggest differentiator is, do you have insulin resistance or do you have type 2 diabetes? Or pre-diabetes, right? So insulin resistance is your body kind of sort of responds to insulin. The doorman's there a decent amount of time, but not 100% of the time. Pre-diabetes is he starts skipping days at work completely. And diabetes type 2 is he quit his job, right? He's just not showing up. And so and insulin resistance is in things like PCOS, if you have that. It's in metabolic syndrome, if you've had that. It's in, a lot of times we see it in adrenal fatigue or cortisol issues, high stress. So if you have insulin resistance, that often turns into prediabetes, which often turns into diabetes. So if you have any of those issues, it would probably be more fitting to consider berberine with the bitter melon versus just the berberine alone.
All right, cool. Gwen had a great question. She said, how can someone who has completed chemo work on increasing their red blood cell count and sodium levels if they're struggling with that?
So what we post-chemo, chemotherapy is kind of like, it's almost like taking an antibiotic, for lack of a better, I mean, it's much more intense. So I don't want to like down-regulate. I'm just using this as an example. But when we take antibiotics, it's going to kill the bad bacteria, virus, or whatever, and our good bacteria, which leaves us vulnerable for future infection if we don't repopulate with probiotics, right? Chemotherapy can be very similar. It's not just going to kill the tumor cells or the cancer cells, for example. It's going to damage any and all cells in the area. It can. Now, it does seek out those cancer cells, and those cancer cells are more sensitive to that chemotherapy, but so are all the other tissues in the area. So we're getting rid of the bad thing, but we're also causing damage to perfectly healthy tissues a lot of times with chemotherapy. And that's a risk that you take. So it's a cost-benefit ratio. How aggressive is the cancer? If chemotherapy is going to address it, then you take that chance of degrading healthy tissue and then work on the body's ability to rebuild. So in this case, with this question, something in the spleen, something in the bone marrow, where those red blood cells are made in bone marrow and broken down in the spleen usually. And so something in the pathway of, you know, the red blood cells following their blueprint has been broken. In a lot of cases, what I know to be true about making red blood cells is we need a very specific set of ingredients to make red blood cells. Folate, B12, iron, oxygen, all of these things are necessary to build quality, high integrity red blood cells. So if the person post chemo has issues with appetite, has issues with certain foods, can't keep down supplements, for example, they're probably going to have problems making or getting enough of those ingredients to feed the factory to make those red blood cells. So first things first, obviously this isn't my patient, I can't give medical advice, but what I would definitely recommend is having them talk to their primary care physician or their oncologist about, and or looking into research about the specific substances necessary to make healthy red blood cells, and then just flooding that pathway with a lot of really good high quality ingredients, and the body can pick up from there, because we're innately, our bone marrow has that blueprint. It needs to and wants to make red blood cells. That's just its job. And so we really want to help coax that and wake that system up by giving it those healthy ingredients.
Okay, that's a great answer there. Well, let's do true or false. Let's go for it. Our theme is cancer awareness. So everyone that's watching, please play along with us. Just type in true or false. And Dr. Jackie, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, do it. Okay, so first one, we all have some amount of cancer cells somewhere in our body right now. True or false? I'm going to say true.
I'm interested to see what everybody else says.
Yeah, we'll jump in there. It's always like a little delayed.
Okay.
True.
Okay, so we have some true. So the answer is yes and no. We don't have enough to be detected on tests. So technically the answer is no, but we are constantly having cells damaged from free radicals, oxidative stress. Whether or not those damaged cells are going to turn into cancer is dependent on you, your biology, your genetic code, and again, your lifestyle and things. So if I were to test any one of us that had no symptoms, we probably wouldn't have enough cells to show up positive on a test, so that the answer would be no. But if we looked deep enough, is there at least one cell that's damaged enough to be considered cancerous? You can't control out of trillions and trillions of cells. There's no test that's going to say 100% certainty that you do not have at least one damaged cell that is cancerous or acting cancerous. So by and large, the answer is no. But do we have the potential to develop cancer because of DNA damaged cells all the time? That answer is yes. So I know it's kind of splitting hairs here, but technically, medically speaking, that's the accurate answer.
Okay. Next thing, there's no such thing as asymptomatic cancer. True or false? I'm going to go with this one, false, that you can be asymptomatic and have cancer.
You're a smarty McGee. Yeah, of course. The answer is yes. Yeah. So when cancer or any other condition is present, but there's no noticeable symptoms, that's when it's called asymptomatic, right? Just because you don't have a symptom doesn't mean you don't have a disease, okay? And many cancers are asymptomatic in their early stages, right? People can walk around with skin cancer thinking it's a mole for years before they notice it's tripled in size and it's at a stage 2 or 3 in terms of, melanoma, for example. But that's why regular screenings are so important. Cancers often trigger really obvious symptoms later on, stage 3 and 4, right? So if you have symptoms very early on overnight, it can be a stage 1 or 2, but it's relatively rare. So yes, asymptomatic cancer can and does happen.
Okay. Next question. Some cancers can be contagious. True or false? I'm going to say false. Can't catch cancer.
Give me more. You can't catch cancer.
I don't know.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can catch it. Like, it's not like a flu. That's my guess.
You're absolutely right. So you cannot catch cancer. Close contact, like sex, kissing, touching, hugging, sharing meals, sharing chapstick, breathing, cuddling. None of these things are going to spread cancer. Now, what you can spread are viruses that are highly linked to and cause cancer. Okay? HPV is a perfect example. Yeah. Just because you have HPV is not a guarantee you're going to get cervical cancer, right? HPV, human papillomavirus, is very, very common. A lot of people have it. It's an STI, or sexually transmitted illness. And it's a virus that once you have, you will have for the rest of your life. Now, there are 2 high-risk strains that can develop into cervical cancer. So by having unprotected sex, did you pass cancer to each other? No. Did you engage in a high-risk behavior that could make you more exposed or vulnerable to developing cancer? Yes. Okay. So this is why screenings, STI testing with new partners, all of these things are very, very important. We have, a lot of viruses can potentially develop into cancer, like hepatitis B, HPV, MCV, HIV, EBV, Epstein-Barr virus sometimes, so which is the virus that causes mono. These are all potential ways to, develop cancer, but no, cancer itself is not contagious.
Yeah, and HPV, there's a vaccine. You guys did not know that, but you have to be under, I think, 26 or 27 to take it.
Yeah, so the body can naturally clear. The body can naturally clear HPV cells in a lot of cases prior to the age of 30. Again, we just have those enzymes that are going to help our cell turnover be faster. But yeah, at a certain age, that's why the vaccine is only effective up to age 26, 27. And by the way, the 2 strains are 16 and 18. So those of you ladies who have HPV, if you know, get your strain tested. They don't always test which strains you have. So make sure you get a strain test and understand if you have a high-risk strain.
Yeah, that's really good info. Okay, we did have a question here. What are the chances of reoccurrence if you follow a much better lifestyle after chemo? Is it all based on damaged DNA?
That's a really, really good question. And that's called survival rate, remission rate and survival rate. So survival rate's the percent of people who live through a certain type of cancer. An overall survival rate's the percentage of people with a certain type and stage of cancer, the likelihood of them responding well to treatment and living for a period of time, years or decades after. And again, that survival rate, that remission rate is different for every cancer, and it's different for every biodiversity. So somebody who has the gene for breast cancer and puts themselves at risk by taking, estrogen foods and chemicals and products and things like that, that rate of it's going to make them more vulnerable to developing it. And so that's going to be a completely different survival rate, response rate to something like a skin cancer, to something like a colon cancer or a lung cancer, for example. So it really does depend on the patient and their genetic code, what genes they carry for certain cancers. It's going to depend on the type of cancer, the stage of that cancer, the type of treatment they received for that cancer, and their age, of course. So we have so many different factors to take into consideration that it's really hard to answer that question directly. So I hope I don't sound like I'm dodging it. It's just, I would hate to give inappropriate information that's not applicable to the specific case or person asking. So, I just don't know those variables, so I can't answer to that specifically, but those are the things I would ask my doctor or oncologist about to know my specific remission and survival rate statistics.
Okay, very good. And then thank you guys for the follows. We've gotten a couple people follow. If you haven't hit follow yet, hit that follow button. And our next question, there is no cure for cancer. True or false? I've been thinking about this one. No cure for cancer. I feel like there's ways to treat, but not a cure. Maybe? I don't know. I'm on that whole like maybe. So I'm gonna go true. There's no cure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there's no cure, unfortunately, for cancer that we are aware of in the scientific world. There's a lot of speculation about cancer cures and things, but cures means that it eradicates it 100%. And unfortunately, there is no cure for cancer, but there are treatments for cancer, right? And what those treatments do is get rid of the cancer cells to a small enough population where it's not detectable on tests anymore. And that's known as remission. So treatments can create remission, where we're keeping the cancer cells at bay, or we're keeping the population small enough to not affect our health. But in terms of a cure, no, none exists at this point in time that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah. Is it possible that cancer can go away by itself? True or false? Cancer can
What do you think?
Go away. I think it's possible. I'm gonna go true. Maybe.
You're absolutely right. It's very, 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 very rare. It's called spontaneous remission. It's rare for it to go away on its own without treatment, and in almost every case, treatment is required to destroy those cancer cells and stop them in their tracks. Because again, cancer cells don't function like normal cells, right? But miraculous disappearance, there have actually been about 1,100 cases documented in the world. And those studies show that cancer sufferers who, it's called, again, spontaneous regression or miraculous disappearance, depending on what article you read. But essentially, their cancerous tumor has resolved all on its own. They're pretty incredible stories if you want to look it up after the episode. I highly recommend it. And every story is different. We haven't found congruencies between any of the cases, at least statistically significant ones, meaning that there's a pattern that is consistent enough that now it can be studied, unfortunately. So it has happened, but it is extremely rare. Out of the millions of cases of cancer diagnosed every year, like I said, only about 1,000 to 1,100 have been spontaneous remission.
Wow. And I bet those people are like, I just want to live my life. Stop studying me.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're like, hey.
Well, they're anomalies, you know? Yeah, they're anomalies of science. And that's what makes me, this is what makes me hopeful, is just because no's the answer today doesn't mean it will be a no tomorrow. And I mean, think about it. Lister, right? He was the scientist who people thought he was mad 150 years ago when he's like, you know what, guys? I think there are these tiny little things we can't see or feel all over our body and in our body that can kill us. People thought he was crazy. And then 60 years later, the microscope was invented and they're like, that Lister had a point. Under the microscope, now that we can magnify stuff, bacteria, yeast, viruses, fungus, they are real, right? But we didn't have the tools to develop that theory, to test that theory. So there are tons of theories out there right now that sound like complete hogwash to us. right? Like this cancer treatment, or this is a way to get cancer spontaneously remission, or, you know, addressed, or, you know, to disappear or something. And people probably sound, for all intents and purposes, crazy, you know, especially in the medical field, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong. It means we don't have the tools, the tests, or the technology right now to be able to prove them right or wrong. Okay. So, you know, hoping and praying that our children or our children's children will create the technology and the innovation necessary to develop a cure. You know, that's really the direction we're headed in, hopefully.
Absolutely. Let's see, Gwen had a follow-up. Can people get tested for which cancers they may be more susceptible to, or what cancer genes? So yeah, you can get tested for that.
Yes, definitely. So you can do genetic panel testing for certain cancers for sure. Certain leukemias, definitely breast cancer. You know, some cancers, there's a very strong genetic link, like, you know, Ashkenazi Jew background. If you come from Ashkenazi Jew, the likelihood of breast cancer is significantly higher with that heritage. I know 23andMe, I've done my own profile. Yeah, so if you're comfortable with that, they test for dementia gene, they test for Parkinson's and Huntington's gene, which I know is not cancer, but you know, they test for cancer, breast cancer and things like that as well, uterine cancer, cervical cancer. Now, they're not going to test for risk factors like the viral load of certain people. You know, clearly you need to go get a serum test, a doctor test, a pelvic exam for a woman. But, you know, there are definitely tests out there that can test for a lot of genes. That can cause cancer for sure. Yeah. There's also screening tests. So getting your mammograms every year after the age of 40, getting prostate exams every year after the age of 40, getting your colon, you know, colon cancer biopsy, go to the dermatologist, get all your lesions, all your moles, everything measured, everything documented. So over time we can check for changes in the borders and the shapes and the sizes and the thickness, right? So you can get genetic testing, get regular screening, and the combination of those two are going to be really great in helping you get early detection.
Yeah, I've done 23andMe. I did it when I was like, when it first came out. I was one of the early adopters of it, and I've loved that. I still like fill out their little genetic question all the time. But yeah, it's really interesting. And actually, my genetic ethnicity is like 99.6% Ashkenazi Jew. So I'm like almost a purebred of that, and that's very disturbing about the breast. I know. It's like nobody is like that much of one thing, but my family, I guess my ancestors just kind of stayed real tight knit. So,
wow, that's incredible.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
I think it's like
I think anytime you have, we see this in micropopulations, anytime you have a biological group and they adhere very strictly to a religious belief system, then that's when you see a lot of purity, genetic purity, right? Because they want to maintain, following the religious code, to maintain the strict bloodline, if you will, right? So that's usually, and Jewish are one of the biggest that seek to maintain that, right? Because it's tradition and it's heritage and it's passing along genes and things like that. So it's super impressive, but it's also not really that surprising.
Yeah, and of course it's changing a lot now in America. I mean, my ancestors were all Eastern European, but yeah, now I think the religion is a little less like, you have to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, well, let's do a couple more questions, then we got to wrap, guys. I can't believe it. We're already almost at our hour mark. So sooner or later, cancer causes pain. True or false? Sooner or later. I mean, oof. I'm going to say eventually, yes, it will cause pain if it's long enough.
So right now, research guesses about 1/3 to 40% cause pain, and the rest, you're not going to be, you know, again, pain is associated to how large the growth is. So bone cancer, testicular cancer, you know, pancreatic cancer, all of those things. We see a lot of pain with those, but then others that are small, or skin cancer, a lot of times there is no pain. So about 40 people with cancer will have pain.
Okay, so I got that one wrong. And then another one is using a cell phone increases the risk of developing cancer. Oh gosh, I don't want to know the answer. I'm like attached to my phone.
So
I'm gonna say yeah.
Right now, there's no convincing evidence that says for sure, but we do know that there is a real phenomenon called EMF sensitivity, electromagnetic field sensitivity. People who live under power lines or have towers near their home report headaches, higher prevalence of cancers and things like that. But the cause and effect thing, there's so many variables. How do they eat? How do they drink? What are they putting in their body, on their body? Are these underserved communities of poverty where they don't have access to medical care, right? So because there's so many variables to consider, there's no direct relationship that's a cause. It's correlative right now, meaning like it could be connected, but there's no like 100%. We put these cells in a petri dish, we add EMF and cancer, right? So there's no definitive yes right now, but it's still, again, correlative, and there's theories about EMF causing cancer and DNA damage to cells.
Yeah, and one thing I'd heard, I saw this on Dr. Oz years ago, but when you work out, like never put your cell phone in your sports bra, because they said that can actually cause cancer cells.
Never.
So,
and I would never do Bluetooth. I know a lot of people love the buds. I get it. There's no cord in the way when you're working out. Totally understand the convenience, but under no circumstances would I want EMF drilling into my brain. No, I always use corded headphones. I'm the old lady at the gym. I don't care personally. I've done extensive research in EMF. I was actually working in Switzerland doing it, where they're much into those theories. And what I found was pretty shocking. So that's a whole nother episode. I know we want to get to the last true or false before we wrap up.
Yeah, two more. We'll do rapid fire on them. Okay, can dogs smell cancer in humans? True or false? I'm going true.
Yep, 100%.
So
they can smell it in your skin, in your breath, in your sweat, in your urine, in your feces. They know. If your dog is biting at a certain part of your body all the time, sniffing a certain part of your body all the time outside of your genitals, chances are that could be a sign to get rid of the cancer. They're trying to get it off of you or detect it for you. So just be aware. Some dogs, it's natural, but a lot of dogs do need very specific training to know what exactly they're smelling or what they're looking for. But yes, dogs are great like that. It's like a magic power they have.
It is amazing. All right, last one. Cancer can stay dormant for years. True or false? True.
Yes, 100%. Cancer cells can definitely stay dormant for years and years and years. Mount Sinai in New York does a lot of studies about it. So the cells cease dividing, you're in remission, maybe a couple survive in it's like an acquiescent kind of like dream state. They're bound in this collagen matrix, so they're unable to proliferate or duplicate essentially. But then just some sort of trigger, some sort of chemical, some sort of something breaks them open, and then the potential to develop cancer can happen. But yes, you can also have dormancy or again, remission, where there's a low enough population it doesn't show positive on a test.
All right. Well, I hope everyone got a lot of takeaways and a lot of good, valuable information from the show. I know I always learn like so much. If you haven't learned anything else, grab these supplements because these are going to help you in that fight, to stay healthy. So yeah, we thank you guys for watching. We're back next week, Wednesday and Thursday. And Dr. Jacquie, you want to say goodbye and wrap it up?
Yes, of course. Please, everybody, regardless, get screenings, get genetic testing, go see your doctor. Just because you don't have symptoms doesn't mean you don't have cancer. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I just want everyone to be aware and responsible. Look up stuff that can have carcinogens in your food and your drink and your body products, and slowly but surely work to eliminate or minimize them. Please, you're worth it. On the paradigm of health, try and make conscious decisions closer to health and further away from disease. You're worth it. I love you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and I'll see everybody next week.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hear the whispers from within, balance to restore, ailings to relieve. Feel the nature keeping us, nature healing us, flowers, leaves, and roots within. Hear the mind calming you, soothing you. Love and kindness inside out. Let the herbs from Middle World heal. Welcome wellness, welcome wellness. It's revealed herbs, Middle World herbs.